William has asked us to think about collage when we think about artistic practice and experiment. And he's engaged in a kind of radical endeavor where he tears up bits and pieces of paper and reassembles them and makes meaning that way through our collaboration with him. So one of the early practitioners of collage was someone called Max Ernst. And I'm going to be talking about another practice of Max Ernst that is very productive for thinking about the ways in which archives can animate the historical endeavor through the practice of the arts. So the practice that Max Ernst was interested in was something called frottage. And with frottage, unlike with collage, you actually have something with an embossed surface. And you put a piece of strong paper over that embossed surface and you rub away at it. And through the act of rubbing, something begins to emerge that was on whatever it was. It could be an embossed book cover, a coin, anything like that, a bit of old bone, and suddenly it starts generating meanings of its own. And so I got interested in this endeavor of frottage and thought that it made a tremendously productive way of thinking about archival activity. My work in the archive is to agitate obsessively on the surface. Just keep on rubbing until something starts to make meaning, until something surprising begins to happen there. And the recent piece that I worked on was trying to understand Samuel Beckett's remarkable play, Waiting for Godot. I don't know how well you know the play. There is an astounding figure, Lucky, very ironically named, someone who arrives on stage with a noose around his neck, and he's being led by his owner. And as Lucky arrives on stage, Lucky is silent and is in a kind of condition of misery. But at a certain point, Lucky makes an extraordinary speech. And in that speech, he repeats almost like a mantra, Cunard, Cunard, Cunard. And I tried to unravel what this might be telling us about Samuel Beckett. And I started doing research on the internet. What had other scholars said about the piece? What could Beckett possibly be meaning? And one of them posited that because Beckett was an Irishman who'd lived in France, perhaps Cunard was a joke about canard, the French for duck. And I investigated a bit further because I was unsatisfied with that answer. And I thought perhaps it has something to do with modernity and Beckett's incredibly complex relationship to being a modern Irish man. And I started to think about the Cunard shipping line, which was the great first global idea of human beings being transacted across the world's oceans. And there was a young heiress, Nancy Cunard, who had made her fortune through the inheritance of the Cunard shipping line. And so I started doing some investigation into Nancy Cunard, and this is Nancy Cunard here. And she was a young woman who wanted to get away from the idea of her family, and she actually got herself involved in a very serious and long-term erotic relationship with Henry Crowder, who was an African-American jazz musician, who she basically said redeemed her. And he, having been raised in Georgia, his parents would certainly have been slaves. And so now I'm thinking about Beckett on stage with this person with a noose around their neck, and he keeps on saying, Cunard, Cunard. Nancy Cunard was actually the first person who published anything of Samuel Beckett's. She was his port of entry into the published world. And this is her inside her press, The Hours, that she and Henry Crowder worked on together and published a whole series of extraordinarily significant work, one of which was a collection, an anthology called The Negro, which was published in the early 30s, and it's over 340 pages. And in that collection, that anthology, The Negro, she commissioned anthropologists, social theorists, critics, cartoonists, and she commissioned Beckett to translate all of the French pieces into English. So if you can think about that, there are racist cartoons, there are anthropological stereotypes, there are also the radical socialists claiming truth and justice for the Negro, and so on. This debate about the condition of the Negro happens in this anthology, and there is this idea being promoted by Nancy Cunard, who Beckett is invoking over and over again as a kind of symbol inside the piece. And so it's that kind of combination of scratching on the surface and staring at what you found and thinking through art that engages me and makes me think that we have a long way to go still in working in the aesthetic inquiry inside the archive.